Hey there, grade 6. We're going to start in on a new unit today on decimals and specifically more addition of decimals. And so we're going to start with our introduction. And so our learning target that we have here for today is that I can use decimal notation for fractions with denominators both 10 and 100 and maybe even 1,000. And then the other one is that I can place decimal hundredths on number lines and order decimal hundredths using a number line. So lots of different things, but basically just an understanding that we can use decimal notations with tenths and hundredths, that we can use number lines to show where decimals belong, and that we can recognize which decimals are maybe bigger or smaller than other ones. So there are a couple of skills that we already need to know. The first one is that on a number line, which we've used before, that bigger numbers are to the right. And so what that means here is if I have a number line that goes between 0 and 7, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, if I have A and then B on the number line, I just recognize that B, because it is further to the right, B is bigger than A. That's all we need to recognize. The second thing here, the second skill that you need to know is that you can name fractions based on area models. So that's this one. So we see something like this. We see a circle that's been divided up into 4 different sections, and one of the sections is colored in, and then so I can say that it's 1/4 or 1/4. The other one is that I can look at a number line again and see that there are 3 letters here, A, B, and C, and that I can name those fractions. So if I look at A on the number line here, I know this is tenths because that's what I've written down. A is at 1/10, B is at 6/10, and C then is at 8/10. And so I would write that over here. And so those are the skills that we need to know. All right, moving on to the next page. I have it all written out, lovely half pages. So the next thing that we're going to work on is, the first thing that we're going to work on rather, is decimal tenths. And so this idea here that the fraction 1/10 can be represented in some different ways. So here's 3 different ways. We can represent 1/10 as a fraction. We can represent it on a number line, and so here is 1/10. And then we can represent it on like an area. This is called an area model. Pardon the picture. They will probably get better as the videos go on. So here's some decimal notation. So what we can say is that 1/10 is the same as 0.1. The dot here is called a decimal point. Now decimal point. And so this is called decimal notation. And so we use decimal notation because it takes less space on the page. I've said before that mathematicians are always looking for shorter, quicker ways to write things out. And so decimal notation is a quicker way to write those kinds of fractions. And they represent the same thing. So then if we can do a little bit of the practice here, we can say, well, 2 tenths or 2/10 is 0.2. We could say 3/10 is 0.3. We can say that 6/10 is 0.6. And then we switch it up a little bit. We say that 8/10 is 0.8. And then 9/10 then would be 0.9. And again, just decimal notation, quicker ways to write things than having to write out, 2/10 or 8 and then the word tenths. Just a quicker way to do that stuff. All right. So the next one that we want to do is to be able to represent decimal tenths on a number line. And so I've again drawn out a number line from 0 to 1, and it's all divided up. And then so we're going to put some decimal tenths on the number lines. So if I got to put down 0.8, I can count 0, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8. So I can put a mark there for 0.8. 0.5 would go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. So 0.5 would go here. Just write down 0.5. 0.2 would go then right here. And then I have 0.7, which I can put right here. Sorry, that's a little close together. But that's where I can label them on a number line. Now, the opposite way is we see a number line and it's got some red marks put down. And so what we're going to do is to identify the decimal for each red mark. And so again, this is the same kind of number lines from 0 to 1, all divvied up. And so if I count over 1, 2, there's 3. So I'd say that's 0.3. If I go one more over, that'd be obviously 0.4. And if I keep going from there, so 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, so that will be 0.9. So what we can do then is to be able to use decimal tenths using pictures. And so I've drawn some different looking pictures, and we're going to try to represent these decimals with these pictures. See, the picture has gotten, the circle got better already in just one page. And so we have 0.2. So what I can do is I can just color in 2 of these. We often call them just pie slices, but 2 of these sections because it's divided up into 10 even sections. So that's 0.2. If I have 0.3, I can color in 3 of these sections like so. If I have 0.5, a bit more coloring, but I can color in 5 of these sections. I have to go a little quicker to color in. That's 2. Note to self, make smaller pictures. 3, 4, and then 5 sections. And then if I have 0.6, same kind of deal, I can color in. I don't even have to color them in the same area. I just have to color in 6 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So again, they don't have to be all lined up as long as the same number is colored in. If you wanted to color 6 in that way, that's fine. All right. So again, we're going to do the reverse that we did a second ago, and we're going to take some examples here that are colored in, and we're going to identify the decimal from the picture. Okay, and so again, they're all divvied up into 10 equal sections. We're going to color in. The colors are showing up pretty well. This one we have again 10 sections, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them are colored in. So we can say that this is 0.8. This one again, they're not all in the same. They're not all in the same row, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we say that's 0.7. This one. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, so we say that's 0.5. And then this one, again, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I'd say that's 0.8. And so that's just using one of those skills to be able to look at an area model or a picture and be able to figure out which decimal notation is being represented here. So the next one that we're going to move on to is decimal hundredths. And so what we see here is we have this fraction, it's 1 over 100th. That means 1/100th, which as a decimal would be 0.01. And then here we go, the big hundredth chart with 100 different little boxes, and I've only colored in one of them. And so that also still represents 1/100th. Now, so the question here, how would we write 2/100ths? This is all 1/100th. We would do it very similarly, 0.02. Or 3/100ths, we would write 0.03, just like that. So then we see at the bottom of some practice to write some decimal hundredths. And so we have, it's a little bit hard to see, but that's 9 over 100. So we would write that 0.09. And then we would write this one 4 over 100 as 0.04. 8 over 100 would get written as 0.08. 7 over 100 would get written as 0.07. And then 5 over 100 would get written as 0.05. Now, just as a little aside, I'm always going to write what's called the leading zero. So the zero that's to the left of the decimal point, I'm always going to write that. Mathematicians write that, and so your teachers are generally going to expect you to write what's called the leading zero. So try to avoid writing just 0.05 or 0.06 or something like that. Try not to do that. Or maybe as Yoda would say, do or do not, there is no try. Just write the leading zero for me. Would be great. So just remember that with a hundredth, it's different from a tenth. There are 2 digits after the decimal point instead of only 1, right? So it's 0.09. If you just write 0.9, that means 9 tenths, and that's different than 9 hundredths. It's quite a bit larger. Okay, all right, so moving on to the next bit of stuff. We're going to be writing equivalent tenths and hundredths as fractions and decimals. And so we have here this chart. It's a hundreds chart, but I've got 3 full strips of those written out. And so what I'm going to say is that I've got 3 tenths colored in, and I have 30 individual hundredths, or 30 over 100, written in. And so the key point that I want to write here, or just identify here, is that 3 over 10 and 30 over 100, they are equivalent. They mean the same thing. Okay, so then some practice here. I have another hundreds chart, and that green's a bit hard to see, but I have 50 out of 100 colored in here, which means then that I have 5 tenths written or colored in. So those, again, those are equivalent. They represent the same thing. Here I have 70 out of the 100 colored in, and that's going to represent 7 tenths. They equal the same. They are equivalent. They represent the same thing. And so here it gets a bit trickier. We sort of build on. We have full lines colored in over here, and this one's a bit different. It's got a couple of full lines, and it's got. I'm just going to move it over here a little bit. It's got 3 or 30 hundreds, which we said would be 3 tenths colored in. But then we also have 2 extra hundredths written in. And so the way we would write that as a decimal is we would write that as 0.32, which is the same thing as saying 3 tenths plus 2, well, I hope we don't run out of room, 2 hundredths with the TH and the S. Sorry for the squishing, 2 hundredths. So we can say that this equals 32 or 0.32 or 32 hundredths. So then I got a couple of extra little practice questions here. I can see them pretty well. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 full rows colored in, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 more. So we would say that's 64 hundredths. Okay. Which would be then 6 tenths plus 4 hundredths. Okay, and here I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 full rows. So I would have 4 tenths and then an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'd have 0.47, which would be 4 tenths plus 7 hundredths. Now this one down here, or to the right, bottom right, it's a bit different. It's kind of more to the side, but what I have here is I have 1, 2, 3, lost my count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 full rows colored in. And then I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more. So I would have 8 tenths and 5 hundredths, which would give me a total of 0.85 or 0.85. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to talk about is how to relate tenths and hundredths to place value. So just like numbers that would be to the left of the decimal, so there's like a ones and a tens and hundreds and et cetera, et cetera. In the whole numbers, these numbers are sort of less than 100 or less than 1. There is a tenths place value and a hundredths place value, and then likewise thousandths, 10 thousandths, 100 thousandths, et cetera, as you go further to the right of the decimal. So if I have 73 hundredths, I know that that is 0.73. So I have here 73 hundredths, which is, this one is tenths, the tenths place value. It's 7 tenths, and then I have 3 hundredths. Okay. And so we're going to do the same thing kind of with these ones down here. We'll try to get them a little bit closer together. But if I have 54 hundredths, that's the same thing as saying 54 over 100. And that is 5 tenths plus 4 hundredths. Okay. If I have 8 hundredths, then I would say that that's 8 over 100. Now notice this one, that's going to be 0 tenths, that's a 0, 0 tenths plus 8 hundredths. So I have nothing in the tenths place value, so it's 0. Okay, and so I would write that 0.08. Sorry, I forgot over here. I would write this 0.54. And then over here I have 37 hundredths, which I would say is 37 over 100. So that's 3 tenths plus 7 hundredths. Which would then equal 0.37. Okay, so it's also important to notice that you can change a decimal written in tenths to one written in hundredths by adding a 0 to the right of the decimal. Okay, it's got to go to the right of the decimal. So then notice here that 0.4, if I put a 0 to the right of the decimal, becomes, so it changes from 4 tenths, but it's the same as 40 hundredths. So this one we would just say that this is 40 hundredths. Likewise, 0.9, if I put a 0 to the right of the decimal, the 9, it changes from 9 tenths, I can say it's 90 hundredths, but again, I put the equal sign, which means that they are equal, they represent the same thing. Okay? So, from there, I'm going to move on to rewriting these ones. A bit of practice. We're going to rewrite both as decimal hundredths, so each pair I've got one that's written in tenths and one that's written in hundredths. I got to change them both to hundredths and then figure out which one's bigger. So I just need to, so for 0.5, I need to put a 0 to the right of the number. So here I have 0.50 and 0.42, and I know that 50 is bigger than 42. So I would say 0.50 is bigger than or greater than 0.42. Here I have 0.6 and 0.78. I got to change this one to hundredths. And so now I have 0.60 and 0.78, and I know that 0.60 is less than 0.78. And then likewise here, not really a huge trick question, but here I have 0.3 and 0.5. I need to change this to hundredths, so I have 0.30, and I have 0.05. Now I know that 0.30, or 30 is bigger than 5, so 0.30 is bigger than 0.05. There's a little note here that says C number line. So now what we're going to do is just have a quick look at some number line stuff. And the idea that we're going to try to do here is to relate tenths and hundredths onto a number line. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to count over, let's see, I'm going to count over to 0, or 4 tenths first. So here's 0.0, so 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. And then I'm going to count 3 more to 1, 2, 3. And so that's going to give me, it's hard to see, it's right here. I have 0.43 here, and then I've just marked that on the number line. Okay, so what I have here is some practice ones. They're a little hard to see on the screen, but this one I'm over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So for A, I would have 0.09, so I'd have 9 hundredths over here. And this one I've got count over 0.1, 0.2, and then So that's 0.20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, and then 28. So I'd have 0.28. And here I've counted over 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5. So I'm at 0.50. And then I count 51 and 52. So C would be at 0.52. And then D, I've just counted over 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, and 0.7, and that's where I've ended off. So I'm at 0.70, or 0.7. Okay, and then so that's how we can relate tenths, because we know that 0.1 and 0.10, like that, are equivalent, that they represent the same thing. Okay? So, where we end off is just a little quick look at decimal thousandths. So I have 1 over 1,000. It's the same thing here as 0.001. It's the third place after the decimal. Okay, and so if I have 4 thousandths, I would say it's 0.004. 7 thousandths would be 0.007. I have nothing in the tenths, nothing in the hundredths, and then 7 is my first number. So the last bit of practice that I'm going to show you is describing the decimal here using tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So if I have 0.471 or 0.471, I have 4 tenths plus 7 hundredths, hundredths plus 1 thousandth. Just have to do short forms. For this one here, 0.962, I would have 9 tenths plus 6 hundredths plus 2 thousandths. And then the last one here, 0.508, I would have 5 tenths plus 0 hundredths plus 8 thousandths. And that's how we can start showing decimal thousandths. So I hope that that's been informative. You can check the Google Classroom, and I'll post some practice in your workbooks based on the stuff that we've talked about today. So thanks for listening. Have a great day.